Dad, why is Mom over there with that man? Leo's small voice cracked the air. I looked where he was pointing. My heart didn't just break. It turned into jagged glass. I told you he was a dead end, darling. Some men are born to climb, and others are just born to be the dirt we walk on. Those were the words that hit me before I even saw her face. I was standing in the foyer of L'Avenir, the most expensive restaurant in the city. I had spent 6 months' worth of secret commissions to rent this place out for 3 hours. The candles were lit, the vintage wine was decanting, and in my pocket was the key to a penthouse apartment. My surprise for my son Leo's 10th birthday, and the big reveal of my newly approved architectural project that would change our lives forever. I was finally going to show my wife, Ava, that my years of quiet working and failed proposals were actually the foundation of an empire. But then, in a secluded booth by the window, the very booth I had reserved, was Ava. She wasn't alone. She was draped over a man in a sharp, tailored suit, laughing in a way she hadn't laughed with me in 5 years. I felt the weight of the penthouse key in my pocket. It felt like a hot coal. "Stay behind me, Leo," I whispered, my voice sounding like it was coming from a mile away. I didn't storm over. I didn't scream. I just walked, my footsteps muffled by the thick, plush carpet. Every step felt like a year of my life being stripped away. All those nights I stayed up until 4 a.m. drafting the Riverfront project. All the times I skipped meals so she could have the best clothes. It all flashed before my eyes like a car crash in slow motion. As we got closer, the man, I recognized him now, Baron Kings, a high-profile developer, leaned in and kissed her. Ava didn't pull away. She leaned into it. "Happy birthday, Leo," I muttered under my breath, the irony tasting like copper in my mouth. "Before I tell you how I turned this betrayal into the ultimate payback story, do me a quick favor. Subscribe to the channel and drop a comment saying, Team Caleb. It helps me know you're ready for the justice that's coming." "Mom," Leo said, louder this time. Ava froze. She pulled back from Baron, her eyes widening as they landed on her son, then shifting to me. For a split second I saw guilt, but it was swallowed almost instantly by a cold, hard layer of defiance. She straightened her dress and stood up, not as a caught wife, but as a woman who had already moved on. "Caleb, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice steady. "This restaurant is way out of your league. Did you take out a loan just to impress me for a night?" Julian chuckled, leaning back and swirling his scotch. "So this is the husband? The one who draws little houses for a living? You were right, Ava. He does look tired." I looked at Julian, then back at Ava. "It's Leo's birthday, Ava. We had a reservation. This whole floor is reserved." Ava laughed, a sharp, metallic sound. "Reserved? Caleb, stop the act. I know exactly what's in our bank account. Or rather, what was in it before I took my half this morning. I'm done living in that cramped apartment waiting for a big break that's never coming. I've filed for divorce. Julian is helping me move my things into his estate tonight." Leo gripped my hand, his knuckles white. "But Mom, Dad said he had a surprise. He said today everything would change." Ava knelt down to Leo's level, but her eyes were like ice. "Everything is changing, Leo. You're coming with me. You'll have a pool, a theater, and a father figure who actually knows how to win. Your dad is a dreamer, honey, and dreamers eventually wake up broke." I stood there, absorbing the insults. She thought I was a failure because I hadn't flaunted the project approval. I had wanted to surprise her. I had wanted to walk her through the doors of our new life as a hero. Now I realized I was trying to save a woman who was already rooting for my downfall. "Is that what you think, Ava?" I asked quietly. "That I'm just a dreamer?" "I don't think it, Caleb. I know it," she said, grabbing her clutch. "Enjoy the cake. If you can afford the bill, that is. Come on, Leo, let's go. She reached for Leo's hand, but he pulled back, tucking himself behind my leg. I'm staying with Dad, Leo said, his voice trembling but firm. Ava's face contorted with anger. Fine. Stay in the dirt, then. See how long love keeps the lights on when the rent is due. She turned and walked out, Baron following her with a mocking salute. The restaurant, which was supposed to be the site of my greatest triumph, now felt like a tomb. The staff stood in the shadows, faces full of pity. I looked down at Leo. He was crying silently. I knelt down and pulled him into a hug. Listen to me, Leo, I whispered into his ear. Look at this place. Look at the lights, the gold, all of it. She said we're poor, Dad, he sobbed. She's wrong, I said, pulling back to look him in the eye. I didn't rent this table for a night, Leo. I rented this restaurant because I'm the lead architect for the firm that owns the entire block. The riverfront project wasn't just a proposal. It was approved yesterday. I'm not the man she thinks I am. I stood up and signaled to the head waiter. Bring the cake, I said, my voice dropping the warmth and taking on a sharp professional edge. And call my lawyer. Tell him I want to move up the asset protection phase of the contract. If my wife wants a life with Baron Kings, she's going to find out exactly how much Julian values a woman who brings nothing but debt to the table. The waiter nodded, his expression shifting from pity to genuine respect. Right away, Mr. Newton. As the cake was brought out, a masterpiece of chocolate and gold leaf, I watched the doors where Ava had disappeared. She thought she had escaped a sinking ship. She didn't realize she had just jumped off the most powerful vessel in the harbor. The birthday party was over. The war had just begun. The cake sat between us, glowing under the candlelight, but neither of us had an appetite. Leo stared at the gold leaf decorations, his eyes red. I realized in that moment that I couldn't just be a father anymore. I had to be a fortress. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the heavy silver key with the embossed N on the leather fob. I slid it across the white tablecloth toward him. What's this, Dad? He asked, his voice small. That is the key to the top floor of the Northwood Tower, I said. Our new home. No more leaking ceilings, Leo. No more sleeping with a sweater on because the heater broke. I watched the gears turn in his head. For years he had watched me hunched over a drafting table in the corner of our cramped living room, lit only by a dim desk lamp. He had seen Ava throw my sketches on the floor, calling them expensive doodles, while she complained about the scuffs on her shoes. She didn't understand that every line I drew was a brick in a wall I was building to protect us. I thought back to 3 years ago, the lowest point. I had lost my steady, firm job because I refused to sign off on a subpar housing project that Baron Kings was pushing through the city council. Baron was a man who built tall buildings with hollow hearts, cutting corners on safety to maximize profit. When I blew the whistle, he used his influence to blackball me. Ava hadn't stood by me then. You should have just kept your mouth shut, Caleb, she had hissed, packing her bags for the first of many sisters' trips that I now realized were likely clandestine meetings with Baron. Your integrity doesn't pay for my yoga membership. I had spent the next 36 months living a double life. By day, I worked menial freelance gigs to keep the fridge half full. By night, I worked for an international consortium under a pseudonym. I was the ghost architect behind some of the most innovative structures in Europe, funneling every cent into a blind trust. I was waiting for the perfect moment to strike back at Baron Kings, and more importantly, to give Ava the life she claimed to want, but on my terms. I looked at the empty chair where she had sat just minutes ago. She had been so disgusted by my poverty that she hadn't even noticed the watch on my wrist. It wasn't a knockoff. It was a bespoke piece given to me by the London firm. She saw what she wanted to see. A loser. The restaurant manager approached, bowing slightly. Mr. Newton, Your car is ready out front, and the legal documents you requested have been messengered to your office. Thank you, Marcus, I said, standing up. I touched Leo's shoulder. Come on, son. The birthday isn't over. We're just moving the party. As we walked out of the restaurant, the cool night air hit us. A black sedan was idling at the curb. As the driver opened the door, I saw a familiar car parked across the street, Baron's flashy, neon-lit sports car. Ava was inside, her silhouette visible against the streetlights. She was staring at us, her mouth slightly open as she watched the freelance architect being ushered into a vehicle that cost more than her new boyfriend's monthly penthouse rent. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just settled into the leather seat and opened my laptop. The first email in my inbox was the one I had been waiting for. Final acquisition of King's Development Holdings. Approved. Baron Kings didn't just take my wife. He had spent years trying to take my career. He didn't know that the consortium I worked for had been slowly buying up his predatory loans and his failing subsidiaries. He thought he was the apex predator of this city, but he was actually just prey that had grown too fat and too slow. "Dad?" Leo asked, looking out the window as the city lights blurred past. "Is Mom going to be okay?" It was the question of a boy who still had a heart, despite the woman who tried to break it. I closed the laptop and looked at him. "Your mother made a choice, Leo. She chose a man she thought was powerful because he shouts. She's about to find out what happens when you cross a man who knows how to listen." I thought about the Riverfront project. To the public, it was a beautiful park and office complex. To Baron Kings, it was the land he needed to complete his King's Landing dream. But he didn't own the land. I did. Through a series of shell companies, I had acquired the rights to the very dirt he was planning to build on. He had already pre-sold the condos. He had already taken the deposits. Without my signature, Baron Kings was a dead man walking, and Ava had just hitched her wagon to a ghost. We pulled up to the Northwood Tower. The doorman recognized me instantly, tipping his hat. As we ascended in the glass elevator, the city opened up beneath us. Leo pressed his face to the glass, gasping as the skyline stretched out forever. "We live here," he whispered. "We own the building, Leo," I corrected him. We stepped out into the penthouse. It was a masterpiece of glass, steel, and warm wood, everything I had ever dreamed of creating. But as I walked through the silent, echoing rooms, I realized that a house isn't a home without trust. Ava had traded a kingdom for a trinket because she couldn't see the value in the man who built it. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Caleb, we need to talk. I think I overreacted at the restaurant. Baron, is being very aggressive. Can I come over to the apartment?" I looked at the message and felt a wave of cold clarity. She was already sensing the shift. Baron's world was starting to shake, and like a rat on a sinking ship, she was looking for the nearest dry land. I typed back a single sentence. "The apartment is empty, and the locks have been changed." I blocked the number and turned to Leo. He was standing on the balcony, looking out at the stars. For the first time in years, his shoulders weren't hunched. He looked tall. He looked like a Newton. "Happy birthday, Leo," I said, joining him at the rail. "Best birthday ever, Dad," he replied. Down below, the city hummed with life, unaware that the balance of power had shifted in a single hour. Tomorrow, the headlines would be full of the Newton takeover. Tomorrow, Baron Kings would realize his empire was built on sand, and tomorrow Ava would wake up in a house that didn't belong to her, with a man who no longer had a name. But tonight, it was just me and my son, standing on top of the world I had built for him. The sun rose over the city, bleeding orange and gold across the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse. For me, it was the start of a new era. For Baron Kings, it was the day the floor fell out from under his life. By 8 a.m., my legal team had officially triggered the default clause on the riverfront land rights. Barron had spent the last 2 years marketing King's Landing as the crown jewel of his career. He had taken millions in non-refundable deposits from the city's elite. He had even secured a massive high-interest loan from a private equity firm to break ground. What he hadn't realized was that the private equity firm was a subsidiary of the Newton Group. I didn't just own the land he wanted to build on. I owned the debt he used to buy the shovels. I sat at my new desk, a solid slab of obsidian, watching the morning news. The anchor was breathless. Breaking news in the world of real estate. King's Development Holdings has been hit with a massive injunction. Trading of the stock has been halted following rumors of a hostile takeover by the mysterious Newton Group. The door to my office chimed. It was my head of security, a man named Miller who looked like he was carved out of granite. "Mr. Newton, there's a woman at the service entrance. She tried the main lobby, but her name has been blacklisted. She's claiming to be your wife." "She's my ex-wife in every way that matters, Miller," I said, not taking my eyes off the monitor. "Does she have a lawyer with her?" "No, sir. She looks distressed. She has a few suitcases." I leaned back in my chair. Ava wasn't here because she missed me. She was here because Baron Kings had probably spent the last 3 hours screaming into a telephone as his bank accounts were frozen. She was here because the luxurious life she jumped toward was currently being dismantled by men in suits with clipboards. "Bring her up," I said, "but stay close." 5 minutes later, Ava walked into the office. The transformation was startling. At the restaurant, she had looked like a queen surveying her kingdom. Now her hair was frizzed from the humidity, and her expensive dress was wrinkled. She looked at the office, the scale of it, the wealth on display, and her jaw literally dropped. "Caleb," she whispered, her voice cracking. How is this possible? I went back to the apartment last night and the key didn't work. I went to Baron's hotel suite and there were men there taking the furniture out. He told me he was having a minor liquidity issue, but then he started throwing things. He called me a curse, Caleb." I stayed silent, letting the air in the room get heavy. "I made a mistake," she sobbed, taking a step toward me. "The stress of the last few years, the move, the money, it broke me. I wasn't thinking clearly. I thought Baron could give us what we needed, but I see now that it was always you. You were working so hard for us, weren't you?" She reached out to touch the obsidian desk, her fingers trembling. "This place is amazing. Leo must love it. Where is he? I want to give him his real birthday present." "Leo is at his new private school, Ava," I said, my voice as flat as a dial tone. "The one with the security detail that has a very specific list of people allowed on campus. Your name isn't on it." The color drained from her face. "Caleb, don't be like this. We're family. I know I said some things at the restaurant, but I was just trying to hurt you because I was hurt. You can't honestly mean to shut me out now that you've finally made it." "I didn't finally make it, Ava," I replied, standing up and walking to the window. "I made it 3 years ago. I spent 3 years waiting to see if you were the woman who would stand by a man in a drafting chair, or if you were only interested in the man in the penthouse. You gave me your answer last night with Julian. Sorry, with Baron." I turned to face her. "You didn't just leave me. You mocked me. You tried to take my son to a man who tried to destroy my career. You wanted a winner, Ava? Well, look at me. I won. And the first rule of winning is cutting out the dead weight." "You can't do this," she shrieked, her desperation finally turning back into the venom I knew so well. "I'm your wife. I'm entitled to half of all this. I'll sue you for every penny of this Newton Group nonsense." I pulled a single sheet of paper from a folder and slid it across the desk. It was the divorce petition she had handed me at the restaurant, the one she had signed with a flourish of Julian's fountain pen. You filed this under the irreconcilable differences clause in a state that honors incapacity of claim during a filing, I said. In your rush to get away from a poor architect, your lawyer, who, by the way, is on my payroll now, included a clause stating you waived all rights to future corporate acquisitions in exchange for the immediate cash value of our joint account. You took your half, remember? It was $7,000. You spent 4 of it on that dress yesterday. She looked at the paper, her eyes scanning the legalese. She realized then that the trap hadn't been set this morning. It had been set the moment she decided to look for a shortcut. Baron is going to prison, Ava, I continued. The riverfront project was his last chance to hide his embezzlement. When I pulled the land rights, his entire Ponzi scheme collapsed. He'll be lucky if he only serves 10 years, which means you are currently homeless, jobless, and tied to a man who is about to be the most hated person in the city. She sank into one of the guest chairs, her face buried in her hands. What am I supposed to do? You're supposed to do what I did, I said. You're supposed to work, but you'll be doing it without my name, and you'll be doing it far away from my son. I signaled to Miller. Escort her out. Give her the address of a decent women's shelter. I've made a donation in her name. It's the last thing she'll ever receive from the Newton estate. As Miller led her away, she didn't scream. She didn't fight. She just looked back at me one last time, seeing not the dreamer she had despised, but the man who had turned her nightmares into his reality. I sat back down and opened my laptop. There was work to do, a city to rebuild, and a son to pick up from school. Baron Kings wasn't the type of man to go quietly into the night. When men like him lose their empires, they don't reflect on their sins. They look for someone to blame. And Baron had placed a massive, blood-red target on my back. By the afternoon, the news was full of his downfall. The King's Landing site was swarming with federal agents, but Baron himself was nowhere to be found. He had skipped his bail hearing and vanished. I knew him well enough to know he wasn't running to a beach in Mexico. Not yet. He had one last debt he wanted to settle, and it wasn't a financial one. I was sitting in the back of the sedan, heading to pick up Leo from school, when my phone chimed with an emergency alert from my home security system. Someone was at the penthouse. Someone with a key.
My heart hammered against my ribs. I had changed the locks for Ava, but Baron had resources I hadn't fully accounted for. I didn't call the police first, I called Miller. He's in the building, I said, my voice tight. Get to Leo's school, double the guard, don't let him out of your sight until I give the word. What about you, Mr. Newton? Miller asked. I'm going home to finish this. When I stepped out of the elevator into the penthouse, the air was cold. The lights were dimmed, but the silhouette of a man was visible against the city skyline. He was holding a glass of my most expensive scotch, looking out at the buildings he used to think he owned. You have a nice view, Caleb, Baron said, his voice raspy. I always wondered what the city looked like from the top of Northwood. It's smaller than I thought. He turned around. He looked like a cornered animal. His suit was rumpled, his eyes were bloodshot, and in his right hand he held a heavy black pistol. He wasn't here to negotiate land rights. He was here because I had embarrassed him. You think you're a genius, don't you? Baron sneered, stepping toward me. The quiet architect, the ghost in the machine. You spent 3 years digging a grave for me, and I didn't even know your name until this morning. I told you 3 years ago that your foundations were rotten, Baron, I said, keeping my hands visible and my voice calm. You didn't listen then. Why start now? Where's Ava? He demanded, his aim wavering. She's the one who brought me your papers. She's the one who told me you were a nobody. I lost everything because I listened to a woman who was too stupid to know she was married to a king. Ava is gone, I said, and you're about to follow her. Not to a shelter, but to a cell. Baron laughed, a jagged, desperate sound. I'm not going to a cell. I'm going to end the Newton bloodline. If I can't have this city, nobody gets to enjoy it from this height. He raised the gun, centering the sight on my chest. I didn't flinch. I had designed this building. I knew every wire, every sensor, and every security measure built into the smart glass of the penthouse. "Baron, look at the floor," I said quietly. He glanced down. A faint red ring was glowing around his feet. "This isn't just an office," I explained. "It's a secure vault. The moment you entered using an unauthorized biometric override, the silent alarm triggered a lockdown. The glass behind you is reinforced with a polycarbonate weave. It can stop a sniper round. But more importantly, the floor you're standing on is a pressurized weight scale." Baron's eyes widened. He tried to step back, but the red ring followed him. "The police are already in the elevator lobby," I continued, "and the moment that gun discharges, the fire suppression system will flood this room with nitrogen. I might pass out, but you'll never make it to the door. You're trapped in a masterpiece of engineering, Baron." "My masterpiece?" The sound of heavy boots echoed from the hallway. The click of the elevator doors signaled the arrival of the SWAT team. Baron looked at the gun, then at me, then at the invincible city beyond the glass. The realization hit him he couldn't even win a fight in a room I had built. He dropped the gun. It clattered against the obsidian floor, the sound of a man finally surrendering to a superior architect. "You really did plan everything, didn't you?" he whispered as the police burst through the doors, tackling him to the ground. I watched them zip-tie his hands and lead him away. As the room cleared, I walked over to the window and pressed my forehead against the cool glass. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a deep, hollow exhaustion. My phone buzzed. It was a picture from Miller. It was Leo sitting in the back of the car, holding a trophy from his school's chess club. He was smiling. "The city council is already asking questions about the family stability of their lead architect." I watched Ava cry on screen, the same eyes that had looked at me with pure disgust in a hospital bed just months ago. She was playing a high-stakes game of PR, betting that I would pay her to be quiet rather than risk a scandal. "She thinks I'm still the man who fears her judgment," I said, closing the laptop. "She thinks I'm playing by the old rules. Call the network. Tell them I'll do a live sit-down interview tomorrow. But tell them I have one condition: Ava must be there with me." The studio was cold and smelled of hairspray and floor wax. Ava was already in her chair when I arrived. When she saw me walk in wearing a suit that cost more than her parents' house, she didn't look guilty. She looked triumphant. She thought she had forced my hand. "Caleb," she whispered, leaning in as the makeup artist adjusted her collar. "Just give me 10 million. That's all I want. I'll sign a non-disclosure agreement. I'll tell the world I was mistaken, and I'll disappear. Think of Leo. Do you really want him seeing his mother dragged through the mud? You should have thought of Leo at the restaurant, Ava," I said, my voice barely audible over the hum of the cameras. The red light on the camera flickered to life. The interviewer, a sharp woman known for her gotcha moments, smiled at the lens. "Tonight we have a world exclusive," she began. "Caleb Newton, the man behind the city's newest empire, and his wife, Ava, who claims she's been cast aside in the wake of his success. Caleb, how do you respond to the allegations that you've abandoned the woman who supported you through your lean years?" I looked directly into the camera. I didn't look at Ava. "I'd like to respond with facts, not feelings," I said. "Ava claims she supported me. I'd like to enter a few things into the record." I pulled a tablet from my briefcase. "This is a log of every hour I spent working the Riverfront project over the last 3 years. And these," I swiped the screen, "are the credit card statements from Ava's sister's trips during that same period. Trips that were paid for by Baron King's shell companies." Ava's face went stiff. That's private information. That has nothing to do with—" "It has everything to do with it," I interrupted. "But more importantly, I have a recording from the night of the birthday trap at L'Avenir. The restaurant has a very sophisticated security system for its high-profile guests, including audio." I pressed play. The studio speakers filled with Ava's voice. "Your dad is a dreamer, honey, and dreamers eventually wake up broke. Stay in the dirt then, Leo." The silence in the studio was deafening. Even the interviewer looked stunned. "I didn't abandon my wife," I said to the millions of people watching. "I removed a co-conspirator of a convicted felon from my son's life." Ava didn't support a genius. She insulted a father while she was auditioning for a spot in Baron King's bed. She didn't want the man, she wanted the prize. And when she thought the prize was gone, she showed her true colors. I turned to look at her for the first time. She looked like she wanted to melt into the floor. The Newton Group isn't just a company, Ava. It's a legacy built on integrity, something you wouldn't understand. I've already filed a countersuit for defamation and malicious prosecution. Any settlement I pay will be in the form of a court order for you to stay 500 yards away from my son for the rest of his life. I stood up, unclipped my microphone, and walked off the set while the cameras were still rolling. I didn't need to hear her response. The court of public opinion had just delivered its verdict in real time. As I walked out to the waiting car, I felt a strange sense of peace. The last thread had been cut. I wasn't a victim of her betrayal anymore. I was the architect of her consequences. I picked up my phone and called Leo. "Hey buddy, I'm on my way home. Want to go get some burgers? Real ones this time. No gold leaf. Can we go to that place with the arcade, Dad?" "We can go anywhere you want, Leo," I said. "The whole city is open." The riverfront project didn't just revitalize the city, it redefined it. 2 years after the Newton takeover, the area that had once been a wasteland of abandoned warehouses and Baron King's failed dreams was now a gleaming sanctuary of sustainable architecture. I had designed it to be more than just offices. It was a community. There were public parks, affordable housing blocks that looked like art, and a center for young entrepreneurs that I named after the only person who had ever truly believed in me, my son. I was standing on the observation deck of the main tower, watching the sunset reflect off the glass. Beside me, Leo was sketching in a notebook. He wasn't drawing houses anymore. He was drawing complex machines, engines that could run on water and light. He had inherited the Newton mind, but I had made sure he kept his heart. "Dad, look," Leo said, pointing toward the street level. A small crowd had gathered near the entrance of the King's old headquarters, which was now a public library. A bus had pulled up, and a line of people in orange vests were stepping off, led by a tired-looking supervisor. They were part of a work release program, clearing litter and maintaining the grounds as part of their community service. In the middle of the line, clutching a broom and looking down at the pavement, was Ava. She wasn't the woman from the morning show anymore. The lawsuits I had filed hadn't just silenced her, they had bankrupted her. Between the legal fees and the defamation judgments, every cent she earned now went into a restitution fund for the families Baron Kings had defrauded. She was living in the very dirt she had once warned Leo about. I watched her for a moment. There was no anger left in me. I didn't feel the need to go down there and gloat. The most profound punishment I could give her was exactly what I was doing, living a life of significance while she remained a footnote in a story she thought she owned. "Do you want to go down and say hi?" I asked Leo softly. Leo looked at the woman with the broom, then back at the drawing in his lap. He stayed silent for a long time, the wind whipping his hair. "No," he said finally. "I think I'm done with that part of the book, Dad. Can we go look at the new turbines instead?" I smiled, a genuine, deep-seated warmth spreading through my chest. "Yeah, Leo. Let's go look at the future." As we walked away from the railing, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the state prison system. Baron King's final appeal had been denied. He would be 70 years old before he saw the sun without bars in front of it. He had built his life on the idea that people were tools to be used and discarded. He was now spending the rest of it in a box made of the very concrete he had tried to overcharge the city for. That night, as the city lights flickered on like a sea of diamonds, I sat in my study and opened a small wooden box. Inside was the very first sketch of the riverfront project, the one Ava had crumpled and thrown in the trash 3 years ago. I smoothed out the creases, looking at the pencil lines that started it all. I realized then that the birthday trap hadn't been a tragedy. It had been a gift. If Ava hadn't betrayed me, I might have kept playing small. I might have kept hiding my genius to keep her comfortable. Her departure didn't break me, it unchained me. I picked up a pen and signed the bottom of the sketch, dating it for today. The story of the poor architect was over. The legend of the Newton Group was just beginning. I had built the skyline, I had protected my son, and I had turned a betrayal into a blueprint for a better world. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city. It was a beautiful design. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just the man who drew it. I was the man who owned it. If you enjoyed Caleb's journey from betrayal to the top of the skyline, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel tell more stories of justice and resilience. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. And finally, share this video with someone who needs to remember that their current chapter isn't their final one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.